Welcome to the Ladies Uplift Circle, the podcast. I'm Sister Rebecca, joined by my co-host, Sister Kenya. Today, we're honored to welcome a very special guest, Sister Angelique. Sister Angelique's testimony is one of patience, transformation, and God's perfect timing. From viewing faith through an atheist perspective to experiencing a personal relationship with Christ, her journey is a powerful reminder that the Lord faithfully pursues those he loves. Through seasons of waiting, unexpected provisions, and undeniable moments of God's guidance, she has learned firsthand that his plans are always greater than our own. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's dive into this conversation. I know I introduced you already, but please go ahead and introduce yourselves, Sister Kenya.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sister Kenya from the Bell Branch, and we're happy to have Sister Angelique here in the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I feel like I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. Very excited to be here. I'm Sister Angelique, and I currently attend Coastal Carolina branch in South Carolina.
Perfect. I'm Sister Rebecca from Yosemite Valley Mission, and we're just so excited to dive into this conversation.
In her introduction, Sister Rebecca mentioned how you come from an atheist background, but we would like to know what was your experience of God or your thoughts about him in your early life.
Yeah, I feel like in hindsight now, I know that God was always with me, but that's definitely not something I knew before. I grew up in a different religion, and it was just, I would say that the religion was very culturally focused, and it was kind of like the expectation within my culture to like go on the holidays to our church that our whole family went to, and everyone got married in this church, and everyone had their baptisms as babies in this church and everything. But number one, the services were not in English, so it was really hard to even know what was going on, even though we even went for certain holidays. So I really had no connection with God growing up, no concept even really, until I met Sebastian when I was 16 years old. That was my first actual encounter of someone, not necessarily challenging me, but definitely being bold in their stance, and sharing experiences with me. And I remember I would tell him, you use the term experience, I know the English language, I know what that word means, but I don't understand how you're using it. What do you mean you had an experience? What does that mean? And he would just share all sorts of things. And it's not that actually, because I knew he was such a beautiful person and had such a beautiful heart, I knew that came from somewhere, and I knew he was different than anybody else I had ever met before. And so that made me question, is what he's saying true? And he, the very first day we talked, he told me, you'll never be my number one. I just want you to know you'll always be my number two. God is my number one and always will be, but I hope one day that God will be your number one as well. That was our very first conversation. So he really set the tone, and he didn't hide who he was, what he believed in, none of it. And so I was along for that ride, and I was challenge things here and there, in the sense of saying I'm a good person. I feel like I do good deeds. I have a good heart. I care for people. I love people. I'm compassionate. Why do you get experiences from God and I don't? Does God not love me as much as he loves you? And it's not something I understood. And he would always say, pray about it. Don't take my word for things. Pray for clarity for things. And so that always, I guess stuck with me. But then going to college was hard.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone around me was atheist, essentially. Not the whole campus, obviously, but my friend circle all would identify as that. And it was hard also, I think, because I was a science major in pre-med, not a science major, but just pre-med. And it just seemed like everyone was in agreement that those two things were at odds with each other. Like you can't believe in science and be a science, a science professional and also believe in God. That was just kind of like, and in my circle of friends that were also in sciences, like that was just everyone's understanding. You know what I mean? There was nothing else. And I was like, okay, I'm on board with that. Like that makes sense. Like, sure. Um, and it wasn't until years later that I understood so much more than that.
Yeah. That's actually really interesting in how your early experiences, you were familiarized not necessarily with God, but with the church or a type of church based on your culture, right? So even though you were immersed in this church culture, you did not have a personal relationship with God, which later then led to an atheist point of view, which makes a lot of sense on what you're saying.
Yeah. It was easy to deviate there. If you don't, what's that phrase? Like if you don't, basically if you don't stand firm in something, you'll fall for anything, and that's kind of what it was. I didn't have any firm foundation. And so when, things came my way, I was quick to waver from that.
And I just love how in part of your first conversation with Sebastian that he brought up that God will always be first. And I can't help but think of in our church within the Songs of Zion, we have a song called Second to God. And in the chorus it says, Second to God by his grace, oh hallelujah, such a high place. How happy for me and how blessed to be standing second to God by his grace. And I just feel like that's just a beautiful way to kind of establish that in your relationship.
Yeah. And exactly what you said, like that was important for that to be like, we fall like 20 years later, we've been together. We've been together longer than we've been apart in our lives. And at this point, like that's still our foundation. That's still what we fall back on, is that even though we've had each other essentially like nearly our whole lives, like God still comes first, and we only work because God's in the middle of it.
Based from what you were speaking about, in this case being in a relationship with Sebastian, how did that impact you or challenge you being in a relationship with a believer and now coming from an atheist standpoint?
Yeah. I would say that even though I didn't understand it first, it became like the Church of Jesus Christ became like a safe place even for me in over the years, in a sense. Like I would go with him here and there. And over the years, like, in the years after we met, Sebastian like fell into addictions. And when he was going through trials, the only thing I knew to tell him actually, even though I wasn't baptized or anything, was like, you're a better person when you go to church. Like you need to go back to church. Like you need to pray. Like I just know that, like, I don't fully understand everything, but I know that you're the best version of you when, you're going to God with these things, and you're surrounded by church people, essentially, is what I would tell him. Which in hindsight is kind of funny, because in like my profession, like I could have said any number of things, like you need X, Y, and Z treatment. We need to do this. We need to do that. But I truly like saw the difference. Like the fruit of that was in his life, how it changed him. Like I saw with my own eyes, and I couldn't deny that. Even if I didn't know, like fully understand much more than that, or couldn't put words to it, I knew enough to always try to even redirect him back to God in that way, and back to the church in that way.
That's beautiful. Well, I know you talked about how you were familiarized with the church through Sebastian. Was he a member at this point, or how long had you been familiarized with the church?
Yeah, his family was not in the church, but when he was in Colombia, he was born in Colombia, and at um, when he said he was 3 years old, and at that age, his mom asked what he wanted for Christmas, and he said, "I want a father," and she said, "I can't give that to you." And that night, he has a distinct memory of praying to the Lord to provide him with a father. And he's like, I don't know, like looking back, he knew the Lord before, like he had not been like going to church. No one had taught him how to pray, anything like that. But he spoke to the Lord that night, asking the Lord to provide him with a father. And eventually, he had family that brought him to America, that introduced him to the church. And he was in the church, got baptized when he was 14 years old, just before we met. He had prayed to meet his wife at a young age, because that's what he had seen apostles pray for in a fast and prayer meeting, to meet a wife at a young age that they could focus on the Lord's work. And so he had that desire as well, to do missionary work at a young age, and prayed for a wife at a young age. And we had met right after that. So he had been in the church since 3, baptized when he was 14. And then like he was still kind of like on that post-baptism high when we had met, and he was like very much on fire for the Lord. I just wanted to mention too that years later, after it was 2020, he had fallen away and come back to the church around 2020. And at that point, the Lord directed us to go back to a branch in Michigan. And we went to that branch. We were just directed to go watch, to witness some baptisms that were occurring. And it was at that branch that everyone kept coming up to him and saying, "Oh, Sebastian, we haven't seen you since 2006. Like, it's been 14 years. Like, it's so beautiful to see you here." And in that moment, the Lord gave to him that this is where you ask for your baptism at a youth in action. This is where you ask for your wife at a youth in action fast and prayer. And now your wife is next to you. She's baptized in my church, and eventually like had revealed to him that he was the father he had prayed for. So I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah. That's beautiful how the Lord orchestrates everything in our lives for good when we love him. The bad that we go through based on our actions or our decisions, he always finds a way to turn it into good. So I think that's truly beautiful. I do think it's important to ask, how did the Lord begin to, in this case, soften your heart? Talking about your background and knowing that you were familiarized with the church, and now being in a relationship with a baptized member, how did God begin to work in your heart and begin to nudge you towards baptism?
It took COVID. It took COVID to like fully, like when I say my life, like I knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was 8 years old. And that was like my only mindset. I was like hyper focused my entire life about like being the best applicant, doing the most, like all of it. Just like a very, like almost like a single track mind in that way. And I was in medical school at the time, and because, when COVID first hit, everything was so like new and scary. No one knew what to do. All the medical schools were like, just pull the students out. It was a liability for us to be in the hospital at that point. And so we got pulled out, and I've had all this free time that I've never had before in my life. Like I never had like true vacation time where I wasn't studying or doing something. So I was like, what do I do with all this free time? And so Sebastian was inspired to have us read together. The Lord placed that on his heart to have us read together. And so we started with the Book of Mormon. We were reading the Book of Mormon, and he was showing me videos that he grew up with, like movies from like biblical stories and things like that. And we were watching, it seems simple to like even watch those things, but I hadn't grown up with any of those stories. So all of that was like very new to me. And so I felt like a child in a sense, so just like relearning, I guess, like the basics. And we were watching church on Zoom because that was the option at the time. And I remember we were logged into a Zoom meeting, and I was plugged in. I was dialed in. I was like, oh, this is going to be a great message. It's going to be a great service. And Sebastian's like, we need to switch services. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, the Lord spoke to me, and I just know that we're supposed to switch church services. So I'm like, what are we going to listen to? And he had just that morning received a link from a branch that he had never received a Zoom link for before then or since then. And so I'm like, fine, kind of begrudgingly. And we switch Zoom meetings. And as soon as we switch, he knew that the message was for me. And he knew that I was being called. And he actually, to the point where he wanted to turn to me and say, don't you see that you're being called? And he said, that's the first time the Lord audibly spoke to him and said, do not say anything, for I am calling her. And basically after that meeting, it was like the next day I had asked for my baptism. But it took all the distractions sort of the world to be taken away for me to like be able to think so clearly and think so like without outside influence in my mind, but to think really for myself for the first time, which I think is so counter to what people think about religion and think about like, that we're just following like sets of rules and groups of people and this hierarchy, and like people have that view of religion. And for me, like it was such a moment of clarity that I was able to like freely think for myself and make such a clear decision.
What I was thinking of, because he had prayed for a father, and it says in Mosiah 5:7, and now because of the covenant which you have made, ye shall be called the children of Christ, his sons and his daughters. For behold, this day he hath spiritually begotten you. For ye say that your hearts are changed through faith of his name. Therefore ye are born of him and have become his sons and daughters. In a way, our Lord Jesus Christ is our Father.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I just wanted to add that during that time, during COVID, Sebastian was becoming a U.S. citizen, and he had the option to have a new last name. And we were trying to think, we were not married yet. And so he was offering basically, though, to take my maiden last name. And I said, you don't need to do that. I didn't feel strongly about that. And so we were both kind of in unity then about just doing something different for ourselves and just setting a new path for our family, and coming up with a new name together. And I was thinking very naturally, what could be like the coolest sounding name ever? I'm like, and I had like a really difficult ethnic native last name. And I was like, it could be something simple, like no one could mess up like De La Vega. Like how cool is that as a last name? Like out of every example. And while we were watching one of those like children's like biblical movies, one of them was about Joseph of Egypt in the Coat of Many Colors. And that was a new story for me. And we're sitting there watching it, and then many names have been said throughout the whole movie, obviously. And then all of a sudden they say the name Manasseh. And the Lord, like I knew in my heart, the Lord spoke to me and said that that's our last name. And I told Sebastian, and he was like, are you sure? Because he had known my thought process. He knew, like, I had a running list of possible last names that I had wanted for us. And he's like, are you sure? And I was like, I mean, like, naturally, this is not what I was thinking. But I know that as soon as I heard that name, that was our name. And like, even in a natural, not even a natural sense, but you could think like, why not Ephraim? Like the blessing was on Ephraim, And so we didn't know why. And I didn't even know about like, that's the first and like only time I had heard the name Manasseh at that point in time. I didn't know what it meant for us. I didn't know anything. So yeah, that's the name that we went with. And the Lord has confirmed that last name for us, like later experiences that I'll share. But I just wanted to mention that time in our life, like the Lord was, don't even think I was baptized when that happened, and I've like felt that the Lord was working with me at that time.
I think that's so wonderful that, in both of your lives that you've felt that prompting of the Lord or how he speaks to you and how he's guiding you through your life even before you truly knew him. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. Even after I was baptized, I like we were in and out a little bit. So we were not fully like we went back to our lives a little. We had like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I remember that Sebastian came home one day and like he's like, we need to rid our lives of everything that's holding us back from the Lord. And I'm like, what's holding us back? Like what are we doing wrong? And he's like clearing out the house of like everything. And I'm like, wait, do we need to really get rid of that? Like trying to like justify things a little bit here and there. I just didn't fully understand. I'm like, this seems extreme. Like it was coming across to me as extreme. And he was telling me that the Lord had given him experiences, about Zion and other things. And I'm like, I'm again, newly baptized. I had just found out about Joseph of Egypt for the first time, let alone Zion. And I was like, what are you talking about? And like, so I'm like, oh, great. Like he's, doing his own thing right now. And I'm just along for the ride. Um, and I just didn't get it. And I really struggled with that. And he was like, I need us to be on the same page with this. And I really, really did struggle. And I wanted for us to be on the same page. And I wanted to support him. And I knew that like with his, like history of addiction, like things needed to be cleared out of the house. Like we needed to, like simplify our lives in that way. And we did need to focus on the Lord, but there was so much of that other things that like in his experiences that like I just didn't fully understand everything. And I'm like, well, can we have a little bit of both though? Like I was really battling back and forth with that. Like on one hand, I knew that we needed to rid things, and on the other hand, I was trying to justify. And I was really, really struggling. And but during that time, the Lord had it was upcoming my first April conference. We were like getting ready for it. And the Lord, Sebastian kept telling me, pray. Like, if you're not sure about what I'm saying, if you're not sure about the experiences the Lord's giving me, he's like, pray about it. Like, don't follow me, follow the Lord. We don't follow men. And so I would pray about it. And I prayed and I prayed. And one night, the Lord, it must have been like 3 a.m., the Lord awoke me from sleep and I just shot out of bed. I stood up on my feet and the Lord spoke to me and said, believe your husband, for I'm working for him. And I knew my heart was like pounding, and I knew with like a certainty, I was like, okay. And I just like could accept it after that because I didn't need to fully understand everything of what he was saying and like all the prophecies that I had not yet heard and everything like that. Like I didn't need to have full understanding. I just needed to trust the Lord. And so I really needed that experience. And to this day, I rely on that experience. And the Lord had prepared my heart for that April conference in that way too. He had directed us to visit various people. And I didn't realize at the time, like what the Lord was orchestrating, but one of the people he wanted us to visit was Sister Dolores Thomas and Brother Dominic Thomas's wife. She had since passed away now, but she was older still when we had visited her and struggling with her memory. And some people had told us like, oh, she may not be able to share much with you. Her memory is not good. We went there, and she shared so much in such great detail, like greater than I ever could. And it was just so amazing. And I didn't realize while we were with her, but I then went to April conference and I needed to hear everything she had said. She the Lord used her to prepare my heart for April conference, and to use this like beautiful sister that I was like familiar with and had known, to sort of like soften my heart for everything that was to come in April conference that I had not yet heard or experienced before. So I thank God for who he puts in our life and for everyone that he uses to help people like me along.
Absolutely. Yes. It's amazing how the Lord truly will place people in our paths, and
Yeah.
it's amazing how they affect our lives, and it's beautiful how he does that.
Yeah.
I also wanted to add, it's interesting and just how to even express it. I'm in awe at how the Lord works with us individually, in the sense of he knew how to work with you and how to speak to you specifically. And I say this, of course, when you're in a relationship with in this case a brother, who could be maybe so spiritual or has a calling or responsibilities, or even when we read the scripture, we see that the Lord spoke to these men, right? Who he worked through in such magnificent ways, but also to know that he speaks to all of his creation, that he also speaks to his daughters, and that he spoke to you to let you know, hey, it's okay to follow your husband, for it was the Lord speaking and working through him, which is so beautiful. And that's why I say I'm in awe, because I've definitely experienced that, and how the Lord speaks to me and directs me. That's awesome.